Dr. Jack Bloom, being one of the biggest whistleblowers. Where did the Tembisa scandal start?
One person is traced as the mastermind behind 41 fake companies.
It seems like it's connected from way back.
The Gauteng Health Department is a very efficient corruption machine.
Which hospitals are the most affected?
Mamelodi Hospital, they got some contracts. McKenzie Hospital, they got contracts.
Okay. Essentially, Panyasa Yusuf is running a criminal syndicate in Gauteng.
The biggest criminal syndicate of all is the ANC.
Where do we start to fix it?
Put decent, honest professionals in charge and let them do their job. Stop the stealing and start the healing.
And welcome back to the DA podcast. My name is Tembisa Mabhena. I'm with my colleague here, Angus McKenzie, and we're joined by Jack Bloom, but someone that is a legend in the political space, someone that has extensive experience. Jack, I think there are those of us who are still young MPs who you are our role model. But perhaps for those people at home who might not know who Jack Bloom is, maybe can you just take us a bit in terms of who Jack Bloom is? What is it that you do when you are relaxing at home? What is it that you do when you are not holding people accountable? What are some of your interests?
Well, I have to say it's been a long journey. You know, I joined the PFP and we were fighting apartheid, and it was the good fight, and Douglas Gibson was my role model. I grew up in the Mabhena constituency of Douglas Gibson, and, you know, those political lessons always stay with you. This was door to door, and that's good old-fashioned politics. I got 2 dog bites, but you really interact with people. And then I became a councillor in August 91, in the seat that Tony Leon had vacated in Johannesburg. And then I got elected in 1994, and it's been a 31-year journey. I'm the only member of the Gauteng legislature who got elected in 94. Wow. So I've seen them all. Yeah, every single health MEC, every single premier, you know, and Jack Bloom is here. But yeah, look, I think you know, politics is a passion. You get in, you want to. I still like the old PFP slogan. We fight to put things right. And,
there we go.
You know, frankly, I've said it. We must bring it back. Yeah. You know, and that's still what animates me. Let's fight to put things right and get things right.
Now, I think it's absolutely awesome because when I saw that we were chatting to each other today, I obviously went and Googled first. You know, I said, put Jack Bloom, because you've managed to build up a national profile for yourself and being in the province of Gauteng, and purely based on the amazing work that you have been doing all this time. And I don't think it's just about health. It's just your level of services. When it comes down to politics, it's about passion. You can do anything you want to do when your passion's in the right place. So well done, and it's good to meet you. It's absolutely good to meet you.
No, thank you. But, you know, as I said, it's been a long journey. And, of course, when we were only 5, we were elected in 94. So the reason I've spoken on far more things than health. I actually made a specific corruption portfolio at one stage. Oh, wow. I was actually the DA's corruption spokesperson for Gauteng. And I followed the career at that stage of Paul Mashatile, who was elected with me in 1994. Yeah. Oh. And boy, oh boy, the Alex Mafia and everything. So, you know, exposing corruption has also been one of my big things. And of course, the Gauteng Health Department is so, you know, it's a byword for corruption. If you say Gauteng Health corruption, people think, oh my God, it's a scandal, it's this, it's that. And so, you know, it's sort of kept in the news, I suppose.
So this Alex Mafia thing, I just want to pause there because that's an interesting thing. And I know that people like Paul Mashatile and even Toki Sekwale and all these guys have all been part and parcel or involved in something. What was it like to uncover? And still doing so. I think we're seeing a lot of what's coming out of it now through these various commissions. But it was just amazing how these buggers got away with doing the things they did.
Well, there's Paul Mashatile, who's now deputy president and poised to become president with, if I could tell you all the scandals that have dogged him over the years. I mean, on the one hand, you expose these scandals, then nothing happens. Yeah. I mean, this is the frustration we all feel with the Gauteng Health Department. I can tell you the wheels first came off the Gauteng Health Department we had a former MEC called Brian Schlongwa, who was there from 2006 to 2010. Yeah. And there was 1.2 billion rand corruption uncovered, and they just endlessly investigated this thing. Finally, it got to court, and it's 15 years later, they're still trying to extradite somebody from the UK, and It looks like they had a defective application, which I think is deliberate, I think they deliberately do something defective. 15 years later, the corruption that really messed up the Gauteng Health Department, because all the controls were relaxed at that stage, I don't think they've ever recovered from. 15 years later, it's still not finalized in court. So we have the Life of Sedimeni tragedy, 9 years ago, which came to light because I asked a question of the Gauteng legislature. I just said, well, have there been any deaths? And then Kwadani Mhlangu, who was forced to say, there'd been, a number of deaths. And I thought she should be resigned or fired based on the number of deaths. I think it was 36 at that stage.
So sad. Such a sad
And
story.
it turned out to be 144. 9 years later, with a joint inquest, with the commissions of inquiry, there is so much information. These people should have been prosecuted umpteen times, and nothing happened. So people died there. 144 people died, a lot of suffering, and nobody's been prosecuted. Now, of course, we have the Tembisa Hospital corruption, where Babita Deokaran was assassinated. Yeah. She died for doing her job.
Yeah. We're gonna speak about that in depth, because what people read in the newspaper and what they see on TV is sometimes really not the exact nuts and bolts of what's led to some of this. So we'll chat about that later. What I'm keen to know, though, is you've dedicated your entire life to serving. How's your family handled it?
You have to make sacrifices, and they know, being a member of the DA, you have to pitch up at by-elections. You have to do your time. You're a constituency MP. I mean, on the way from the airport this morning, I was dealing with electricity failures in the suburb where I live, and, that's what we all have to deal with. So I think, it's a calling. I don't think people should go into politics for the right reasons.
For the right reasons.
And to me, it's a calling. But unfortunately, I see lots of people go into politics because they want to steal, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's the sad reality of it. And in terms of your family, you're the only politician there. You're the only one that's doing off service.
My parents were not happy that I went into politics. You called yourself trouble. Don't make problems. Don't make problems. Don't make problems.
Yeah.
But it's been an interesting time, and I try to do my best. So as I said, I've been dealing with water shortages and electricity shortages, and corruption. That's what happens all the time in that department.
So you've had your hands full.
Yes.
No, that's quite interesting, Jack. But if there's one thing also that maybe our viewers at home might have an interest on, and maybe something that they don't know, you are actually an established author.
I've written 4 books. The first one was Black South Africa and the Disinvestment Dilemma. It was my MBA thesis, and it was actually a book on political ethics because I'm very interested in that. And I want to establish how people calling for sanctions against South Africa and disinvestment, but it was going to put people out of jobs. Yeah. So to me, that was an ethical issue. So you could say, short-term pain, long-term gain. But, I dealt with that. I actually interviewed black trade unionists. I interviewed Archbishop Tutu. Some very big names. Some of them I had to keep anonymous. Yeah. And that was my first book published by Jonathan Ball. It was, you don't make money in publishing, I assure you. So I didn't make any money, but I was very chuffed. I was the age of 27.
When you wrote your first book, 27?
Yes. It was my first book. book, and I was very chuffed. And at heart, it was about political ethics, actually, because I feel strongly about, in politics, you have to make difficult choices, and how do you make them? And second book was partly biographical. I called it Out of Step. And because I've always been sort of out of step,
While everyone's going here, you're going there.
I've done my own thing, and that was it's partly biographical. And then, of course, there was a collection. I used to write for the Citizen newspaper a number of columns, and I called them Rising Tide. Rising Tide lifts all boats, good economic philosophy, and a collection of those columns was published. And then, of course, very strange period in my life, I ended up sleeping in shacks. Once a month for 2.5 years, I slept in a shack, at various shacks, and I spent the whole day touring, various informal settlements. Then, because Helen Suzman used to say, "Go see for yourself."
Correct.
And there was a shack fire in my constituency, and when I went there, and things were just so terrible, it was actually still cold. It was sort of winter. And, I thought I needed to do more than just call for, pitch up and call for some food supplies and stuff like that. So, I spent the night with this family in the ruins of their shack. And, so it became a book called 30 Nights in a Shack. But I also wrote an article called Don't Forget the Forgotten, because I think people in informal settles are completely forgotten, and you drive past them and their lives. But Helen Suzman always used to say, "Go see for yourself."
Yeah.
And to me, this became go experience for yourself. So as I said, I spent 1 day a month visiting various informal settlements, picking up their problems and tried to assist them. And they were short of water. There was I used to come across 1,000 people and 2 taps. I said, well, how difficult is it to put in another couple of taps? If you put in another 10 taps, you are making so many lives much easier. And I did a lot of that, and in fact ended up fundraising for solar lights and non-paraffin stoves, because these stoves constantly cause shack fires. And it stretched over a 2.5-year period. So it was once a month, 30 nights in a shack, and that was my last book. So
it's absolutely amazing, because people are quick to throw shame on politicians and say, "Oh, you don't know the lived realities of people. You don't do this, you don't do that. You don't know what we're going through." But to spend a night or 30 nights in a shack, I mean, what did it feel like? More than writing about it, more than showing people you've done it, what did it feel like? What was that lived experience of people that we often just drive past and not even care about? What was that feeling like?
Well, I shared the lives of 30 families, basically, over a 2.5-year period, and just saw, things that we take for granted, like, just having water. Although, large parts of Johannesburg don't have water, but, these people had to walk long distances just to get to a tap, and there was a whole crowd of people waiting for a tap, and of course they didn't have electricity, and how harsh their lives was, and that, neglected. As I said, I called it Don't Forget the Forgotten, because these are absolutely forgotten people. And in fact, you could look at them in a positive way, because they're not looking for an RDP house.
Correct.
They've built their own settlement. And in fact, some of them, I remember there was a settlement in Tshwane, which they'd built brick houses.
Yeah.
They had laid out an entire township, actually, Stoffel Park. It was called Stoffel Park. And they didn't ask the government for anything. They'd laid out sort of roads and brick houses. And I think there needs to be a formalization of settlements like that.
Yeah.
And of course, the scourge of shack fires which is an absolute tragedy because, I mean, so people who don't have much then
lose everything.
They lose everything. And that got me looking at fire prevention measures. And it's just very sad. And, of course, Cape Town's had a long-running policy of providing shack materials to rebuild shacks. I've actually campaigned for that in Gauteng, and it was turned down. I mean, I said, the budget doesn't cost much for a budget. I mean, this was the ANC ruling party, which is supposed to care about the poor. And I raised the Gauteng legislature. I said, just make provision. I even costed it for them. It was, actually a small amount. When you see what's being stolen from hospitals, they could have done it. So, look, I came to appreciate that people's lives are harsh. They can be made better, even by small things that just need to be done. But we need to give people jobs. People want to earn their living. They've got the energy. So, in a way, building your own shack, there's a lot of energy there, and we need to channel it in the right way.
I must tell you, I wanted to hear about that story because I do a weekly soup kitchen in my ward, where I just go, we randomly select a part of the area and we go and hand out soup. And a lady walked up to me and she came and she brought a container, quite a big container, and she said, no, can she? And I said, definitely, I'll fill it up for you. And when she left, she said to me the most shocking thing. She said, Mr. McKenzie, thank you very much for this, because this is for my children. Because tonight, I don't need to sleep with my uncle to ensure that my children have something to eat, because I've managed to get food today. And this is the lived realities of people, of a majority of people in our country, that is just bypassed by corruption. It's blatant corruption that is causing the poor to get poorer. It's blatant corruption that is causing the poor to be abused in the manner in which it is. And you have fought corruption tooth and nail. I mean, what's happening in Tembisa at the moment? Man, how long has that discussion been coming on for?
Well, I've always relied on whistleblowers. I've always said that politics is 3 S's. They say location, location, location for retail. I always said it's 3 S's: sources, sources, sources. People contact me. I get anonymous calls sometimes, or I have to earn their trust, and sometimes I meet with them and people send me documents, and I act on it. And questions in the legislature, in Parliament, are very powerful, because you can get information that they're obliged to give you, and sometimes you've got to badger them and ask it in a very direct way, or you use the Promotion of Access to Information Act. I've done all of that, and get the information out there. And the fact of the matter is, life is Sedimeni. I sort of still have nightmares about it, that Kwadani Mshlangu could have got away with it if it wasn't, the deaths weren't exposed by the question I asked the legislature, because literally the evidence would have been buried. If you didn't know that there were deaths happening. And I also got out of her the list of NGOs where there was sense. So journalists went round and they went to these NGOs and said, but these people are starving, they're being neglected, people are dying there. And of course, I thought when she revealed that there'd been a number of deaths, she should have been fired, resigned, but there's no shame in our politics anymore. People get caught out with a scandal and they don't want to resign. But I'll give my due to Professor Mkhoba, the health ombudsman. He worked over the Christmas, New Year's season, and he got out that report on life as Sedimeni within 3 months. And he got all the evidence. Typically these things drag on and you never get it. And he, of course, Kwadani Mshlangu was forced to resign then. And then he exposed it all. But here we are 9 months later, and nobody has been charged. This is the tragedy of it.
But maybe just as a thought, for someone who's just watching, who's sitting at home, maybe someone who's not interested in politics, maybe can you just give us a bit of background? What is Life as Sedimeni? What actually happened there?
Life as Sedimeni was where mental health patients were. It was a private company. Okay. They were paid a fair amount of money to keep them, but they were safe and they were fed. and that's what a humane society has to do. I was tipped off that there were plans to actually close them down and send them to NGOs or other facilities. So I was the one who first asked the question, are there plans to, close them down, and that's how we first got to know, the public first got to know that she had to confirm it. But they're saying no, we're going to vet these NGOs, we'll send them to other government facilities. It was sold as a way to save money, but I think it was actually very callous, because I remember the MEC at the time, Thami Mashlangu, she said, in the Free State, they don't have these facilities, the families look after them. And that seemed to be the sort of aspect that she was going to cut the budget. And imagine, you're going to cut your budget, you don't start with the most vulnerable people, those you should protect. So the plan was to send them to save money, supposedly, and send them to NGOs. And, it was a long-running issue. It went to court. Public interest, Section 27 took them to court. I kept asking questions in Parliament. I warned Thami Mashlangu. I said, this is a looming tragedy. If you send them there, people are going to die. So the fact of the matter is, she was warned. It turned out that when evidence was laid, her own experts had told her that,
That's a problem.
mentally psychiatric patients need specialist care. Anyway, they went ahead and they sort of cancelled the life asset contract, and it was more than 1,200. In fact, larger than that, was sent off to these NGOs, and nobody knew where these NGOs were until I asked a question, and then we sort of could identify, and people could follow up on it. But I'd heard rumours that there were deaths. And so I asked the question, I said, have there been any deaths? And she had to confess that there were 36 at that stage. It was September of 2016. And then, the National Health Minister, to his credit, got in and got the health ombudsman to do an investigation. And then, of course, the stories came in. Yeah. I mean, people had been basically starved to death at these NGOs that didn't get their medicine. Some of them have been buried surreptitiously. The families couldn't find them. I mean, it was absolute neglect, and to this day the families are traumatized because we haven't seen justice for them. And then when the tally came out, 144, and the immensity of what had happened, I mean, I think the Premier should have resigned over it, but
there's no accountability.
No, there wasn't accountability, and they, the key people in the Gauteng Health Department had to leave, but they were left with their pension funds.
Yeah, not to had to leave.
Yeah, but also maybe just something which doesn't sit very well with me, Jack. What was the actual reason why, or what justification did Thami Mashlangu at the time give to say, we are closing down this facility which is providing a critical service for people who are the most vulnerable, who cannot take care of themselves?
Officially, she said she had to cut the budget, and it would have saved 200 million, roughly. I'm giving that amount. And then when we had evidence from one of the commissions, the finance MEC of the time, Barbara Creasy, said, no, we didn't have pressure on them to cut the budget. So she decided herself to cut the budget. I think it was so callous, so cruel, and this person should have been banished from public life. Her pension should be attached. According to the inquest findings, she can be held responsible for a number of deaths for culpable homicide. Mm-hmm. And the inquest was more than a year ago. They came up with all the evidence you could want that Thami Mashlangu, which would be very significant if they charged. The first time you're charging a politician. The politicians love blaming
the officials.
And of course, she also blamed the officials. No, it was the head of the department. It was the head of the mental. of the other department. And, no, the buck stops with you. The buck stops with you. And she was warned, and she went ahead, and she still, to this day, tries to justify herself, and still is not facing criminal charges. Really, there should be culpable homicide charges and a range of other charges. You could throw the book at them, and it hasn't happened, and we have to ask why. When people died. I mean, to this day, it just because the families contacted me.
Yeah.
I was intimately involved with this because families were trying to track their
loved ones.
Their loved ones, and what has happened is that she tried to save 200 million rand. That really was the amount that they were paying Life Esidimeni. I can tell you now, 600 million rand has now been paid by the Premier's office in Gauteng as compensation to the families and to those that are still alive. But as we know, money can't compensate for a death. And so, 600 rand's a lot of money, and, all because some politician decided that she was supposedly going to save money. But look at all the suffering, the deaths, and no accountability as far as criminal matters.
But I'll tell you this, if it, and no, it's not about claiming claiming the price for it. I think if you did not do what you did, if you did not raise these issues in the manner in which you raised these issues, how many more people would have died? That's the sad thing about the situation. How many more people would have died? And just this lack of accountability, and that the ANC leadership in itself has not even deemed it fit to deal more decisively with them on the situation, just tells you more about the ANC as a organization than anything else. It's just so sad. And it would appear that these issues within the Department of Health, the policies coming out of the governing party around health in Gauteng, it doesn't seem to end. These policies that are not being implemented, that are causing real heartache for the most vulnerable people in Gauteng, it just doesn't seem to end. It's seemingly continuing. We've just seen the other day the Tembisa situation.
Well, it's just astonishing, because I would think if you were the Premier of Gauteng, the first thing you should be sorting out is the Gauteng Health Department. But, we had David Makuro who talked the talk, and he said, no, we're going to get task teams, the normal things that they do. We're going to turn around the department.
Bomb squads.
I have heard about turning around the Gauteng Health Department for years. So, I once got up in the ledger. I said, this department must be spinning round and round because, all these turnaround plans. And then, astonishingly, our Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, who's got a very big mouth, lots of promises, he who appoints as head of the Gauteng Health Department, a fellow called Mr. Lesiba Arnold Malatana. He appointed him secretly in June last year. I was tipped off about it, but there was no public announcement until I exposed it. and this man is being investigated by the SIU. Can you believe it? The Gauteng Health Department has a head of department who's under investigation by the SIU for allegedly receiving, with two other officials, 10 million rand in bribes. It's not small money. 10 million in bribes to influence two tenders. Okay. So he is under investigation by the SIU, and he gets appointed by the Premier of the province. So I've tackled Premier Lesufi on this a number of times. And, the latest was there was a lifestyle audit being done, and we were told 3 heads of departments had failed their lifestyle audits. I said, which are the 3? Tell us. No, he's not tell us. I said, was the head of the Gauteng Health Department one of the 3? No. His lifestyle audit has been delayed. He's going to extend it for more information. So I said to the Premier, you're no longer the Premier of Gauteng, because he has an official who's more powerful than you. You can't dismiss him, because Premier Lesufi said he was going to replace all these heads of departments. He's already replaced other ones. But this one is protected. This one is protected despite the fact that he's being investigated by the SIU. And now you're going to tell me they're going to fix up the problems that were at Tembisa Hospital, which I can tell you now are happening at other hospitals as well.
Absolutely. We see the Tembisa Hospital mess, and it seems like it's not something that is just small. We get players, big players who are heavily connected to the ANC. What would you say is wrong within that department? Where do we start to fix it?
Well, it's they talk about these criminal syndicates, okay, and there were three big ones, including Mr. Malmela, the president's nephew by first marriage, and he seemed to be very connected. And his house, the president's house is within walking distance from his own house, and the president says, "I don't know this man."
I was just going to ask you, he's the same guy that the president said, "I don't know this man."
Yes. I mean, and the man is connected with people who are very connected to President Ramaphosa. So, our president claims to be shocked by lots of things. He was shocked by...
Apparently as a nephew.
Etc. So these people do know each other, I believe. And, so we have got these three big syndicates, and there's a number of smaller ones. Even the smaller ones are, about 30 million rand. They're not so small, but they're not hundreds of millions. But, I mean, someone made the observation over the last week, which I think was quite insightful. He said, look, the biggest criminal syndicate of all is the ANC. That's what you've got to actually understand, is that it's become a criminal syndicate, and why this continues endlessly is because they're all in it. And and I thought that's very true. They say African national corruption. But if you've got to spend, as President Ramaphosa is alleged to spend or estimated spend 1 billion rand to buy the nominees to be elected, and his rival also to spend several hundred million, then something is seriously wrong. So you've got an interconnected syndicate. It all makes sense if you look at the Gauteng Health Department, you say, well, they should be providing care for the poorest of the poor, people who can't afford private medical aid, and, you'd think, take the money that you've got and spend it effectively, okay. Put the best people in charge, run a tight ship, do what the Western Cape Health Department, which is the only one that gets a clean audit for several years running. Every year the Gauteng Health Department, the audit gives the most horrendous reports, and do that, but then you misunderstand it. They're not inefficient they're not inefficient if you actually understand what they really set up for. They're very efficiently
at doing what they need to do to be there.
Yes, they're a very efficient corruption machine.
Correct.
The Gauteng Health Department is very efficient at siphoning off money, because if you look at what you had to do at Tembisa Hospital, they had all these fake companies. They had, one person is traced as the mastermind behind 41 fake companies. Now, these companies they don't have tax certificates. They don't have triple BEE certificates. They're not registered with the South African Health Regulatory Authority as they should be. They're not registered in anything. So, any lowly clerk should just do the slightest scrutiny of one of these companies and throw them out. But no. So they make sure that their guy is appointed as the CEO of a hospital. They make sure that the chief financial officer of the Gauteng Health Department is a captured person as well. So it's not going to be picked up.
Cadre deployment.
Cadre deployment. Put your buddies in place, and they turn a blind eye. Right, or they participated in themselves. And then, as we've seen from the SIU, then you capture all these people in the supply chain management. And, one of them got 30 million rand as a sort of bribe. So there is big money involved in this, and it's all one big criminal syndicate. Unless you sort of change at the top, it's just going to happen again and again.
Yeah, so there's almost a direct correlation between the ANC's decline in support over the last 2 election cycles and the fact that they are struggling to siphon money out of departments. There's almost a direct correlation. So the less money, and so you have the State Capture Commission that sat there. Now you've got this one coming in. There's been all these highlighting of corruption, etc. But as less and less money is being siphoned off into the ANC from these various line departments, their electoral support is declining.
That's very interesting. But also one other aspect, Jack, which is makes me angry, the loss of lives of whistleblowers. Babita Diokoran had to die the way that she passed away at the hands of ANC cadres who are hell-bent on just looting state funds. Nothing will stop them. And these are people who are vicious, people who are just scavenging at the state, who are just blood-sucking at taxpayers' funds. how do we sort of organize the state to prevent some of these things? Because you've got people who are brave, who raise these issues, who give you information. As you said earlier, you are given some tip-offs. But we get those heroes and heroines who get taken out in that way, and government is not doing anything about it.
You know, if I think about Babita Deokaran, here was a civil servant doing her job. And people like that are so precious. She was dedicated, and she went through all these transactions. She blew the whistle internally. And of course, somebody, I think, must have tipped off the mastermind of whoever ordered the hit on her. And there was so much money involved that she had to be silenced. And it's just absolutely shocking that these are the people we should treasure, dedicated civil servants to get rid of corruption. And in fact, you know, we haven't been kind to whistleblowers. They don't receive, sometimes their lives are ruined. And I think we need to revise our whistleblower legislation. But, you know, we must treasure people who speak out because, you know, and also the journalists like Jeff Wicks, because we would know nothing about this if Jeff Wicks had not recovered Babita's cell phone and laptop, which the police did nothing about it. They had it for nearly a year. They did nothing about it. So the family managed to recover it, and they gave it to Jeff Wicks, and he went patiently. I've just finished his book. It's extraordinary. It shows you the depth of research that he had to do, but he did it. And of course, it was covered up by the Gauteng Health Department. Babita asked for a forensic audit of the hospital. The CFO at the time sort of promised her she'd do it, but didn't. But you know what the key thing is? Babita Deokaran had identified 104 million rand in very fishy payments to these fake companies. She said, we must stop them. And then she ordered, there's a WhatsApp message to the chief financial officer at the time, and she said, you know, our lives could be in danger because of this. So she knew what the stakes were. So in fact, the CFO at the time did freeze the 104 million rand, and then Babita was murdered. And then a little later, the money was unfrozen. I mean, that's what happened. The whole thing was covered up until Jeff Wicks uncovered it, and then it became too big to contain. So we got the SIU involved. But unfortunately, you know, investigation takes time, and we don't see criminal charges. That's the problem.
Jack, tell me, where did the Tembisa scandal start? I want us to spend some time here because it's obviously topical at the moment. People are speaking about it, but many people don't know the nuts and bolts of it. Where did it start?
Well, SIU published a very interesting graph about between 2018, basically, for about 4 years, and they showed that the hospital was grossly overspending their goods and services budget. Now, apart from anything else, if you're a chief financial officer at office, you say, hey, why are you buying so much? What's happened? This is a mid-sized hospital. Tembisa Hospital has a budget of about 1.5 billion rand. Doesn't compare to Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital with 4 billion rand. And Shabmeke, Stibika. You know, it's a mid-sized hospital, but it had been thoroughly captured and grossly overspending over a number of years beyond their budget. So apart from everything else, just a good accounting practice would say, well, wow, what's going on there? Anyway, you know, I think it was deliberately overlooked because they knew what was happening there. What was happening there is that there were hundreds of these fake companies that you could have easily, you know, checked out and deliberately didn't because there's collusion there with, you know, the SIU said low-level clerks, but a lot of people had to be involved for this to be successful. And what the SIUs also found is that these goods weren't delivered at all. It was all fake. So how does anybody, I mean, imagine you're making all these big orders. You're the CEO of the hospital, and you're overspending your budget and nothing's arriving at your hospital. So what Jeff Wicks found was, you know, ridiculous things like skinny jeans, the famous skinny jeans and the 5,000 rand armchairs. And so I was interested to find out, well, where are these skinny jeans? Where are these 5,000 rand armchairs, luxury armchairs for a hospital that doesn't have enough beds? So I went there, and I said, well, where's the skinny jeans? No, that was a clerical error. It wasn't skinny jeans. It was sutures for surgery or something. I don't know. They try to give you the story. And I said, okay, and these chairs, the wingback leather armchair, lounge armchairs. Anyway, I said, no, we'll show you. We've got these chairs and something looks a bit different. But I said, so you spend 5,000 Rand on this one chair? I could go to the Office Mart down the road and we could get it for...
I'll get you 10 for 5,000.
Yes.
So basically what you were saying was happening at Tembisa Hospital, Jack, is that we've got a hospital where they have to procure medical supplies so that they can assist patients. And as you say, it's a mid-sized hospital, about 1 billion rands. But then you get these companies who have nothing to do with the medical supply field. We've got no experience. It's just companies, shell companies, who come into the space. They bid for contracts for medical supplies. But as you say, they don't deliver the medical supplies. The patients, then what happens to the patients? Yeah. Because as you say, that they procured, they got the contracts, they were paid, but then the medical supplies then don't get to the hospital. And as you say, that they also far exceed their budget. Maybe can you just take us through what was happening there?
Well, if any purchase under 500,000 Rand can be authorized by the CEO. So it doesn't have to go out to tender. Yeah. They can select 3 companies. Yes, 3 companies, and you should take the best value one, obviously. So you find the first red flag was that suddenly there's all these transactions for 498,000, 499,000, 450.
Below the threshold.
Behold the threshold. What they do is they took large contracts and split the contract. Yeah. And of course, that's the biggest red flag. So if there was any sort of scrutiny of this, well, why are you splitting all these contracts? I mean, it's illegal to that. It shouldn't be done. So they were doing that. And then, of course, you had to get 3 companies. You should take it from a panel, an approved panel. But then what you found is that these 3 companies were all in collusion, and the SIU has found payoffs to the so-called losing companies. So you'd get basically three fake quotes, grossly overpriced on top of it,
And they get paid for their fake quote.
Yes, they get paid for the fake quote, and then they don't even deliver the overpriced goods. So I mean, it should have been picked up right from the beginning, but it was allowed to continue for up to 4 years. And 2 billion Rand is, well, how do you envisage what you could buy for 2 billion Rand? You could...
It's a couple of Lamborghinis. It's 80 million Rand house in Cape Town.
Well, we've seen what crooks would buy for it. I'm just looking at, you could build an entirely new hospital.
Yeah,
you could hire...
the same one. Upgrade this hospital.
You could fill the vacancies. Tembisa Hospital short of doctors. They're short of nurses. They're short of equipment. Ambulances, 2 billion Rand. Look, the estimate, there's a credible estimate that's come out that over the last 10 years, 20 billion Rand has been stolen from the Gauteng Health Department, which amounts to 2 billion Rand a year. I actually think it's an underestimate. But it's even worse than that. Every time they build a new clinic, they pay some fishy company that doesn't complete it. Then they have to pay another company to do it. We've got clinics that have taken 10 years to build. Now, what about the people that should have been built in a year or 2? And the people don't have a clinic for 9 years because you paid some corrupt company and then another corrupt company and they don't build it. So, corruption kills. It absolutely kills. And when you go to a hospital like Tembisa, when you see what the shortage of equipment conditions, you say, and you've got these crooks that just buy Lamborghinis with stolen money from poor people. It's shocking, man.
Is there a case to be made? And I'm sure there must be, but we don't trust our current system to investigate it. But one could easily go back and say, how many lives have been lost because of a lack of service and primary health care in those facilities, that if there were no corruption, people would have survived?
Well, I would actually just look at the waiting lists, and for like cancer and heart surgery and really critical stuff. But let me tell you another scandal in the Gauteng Health Department. You know, in the Life of Sedimeni disaster, they were trying to allegedly save money. But the Gauteng Health Department was actually given 784 million rand from Treasury over a 3-year period, specifically for radiation treatment of cancer patients. So, you know, with cancer, you've got to treat as soon as possible. The fire at Sharpneck at Johannesburg Hospital, unfortunately, you know, destroyed some of the radiation facilities. So they were given, yes. So that was also, the police found it was arson. It was probably to cover up, and
also, by the way, while still on the asset, there were also a couple of fires at Tembisa Hospital as well.
Yes, suddenly they got not one fire, but they got another fire, 2 fires. You think these fires also, in the case of Sharpneck Hospital, they even think it was to destroy evidence because that's because where it was. And at Tembisa Hospital, we still don't know, and it probably also was to destroy evidence. But we have a situation with cancer treatment. The money was made available. The first year, 250 million rand. So here, not a Life of Sedimeni where you say you're trying to cut money. You've got 250 million rand. All you have to do is hire the private sector, provide radiation treatment, save lives of cancer patients. Everybody's happy. They didn't spend the 250 million rand. I mean, you know, it's just the level of incompetence. Because when you put your buddies in control, it's not just there's a moral corruption. It's not just people who steal money. You put your incompetent buddy in control, and they can't spend available budget to save the lives of cancer patients.
There's someone out there that has got cancer. He should be guaranteed constitutionally the right to the best possible healthcare.
Yeah.
And he's not getting it, or she is not getting it.
But the funds are available.
The funds are there. He or she is going to die because the ANC has decided to steal the money instead.
Well,
that's the sad reality.
I've met victims, people, breast cancer victims. She phoned me up, and because I challenged the Premier in the legislature, you know, because there have been 2 court rulings now against the department. It's gone to court, and the court has ruled twice that it's illegal and unconstitutional for them not to have provided radiation treated cancer patients. So I said to the Premier again, I said, well, don't you think you should fire your health MEC? Don't you think you should fire your head of department on this issue alone? Because the court has twice said that, you know, they failed to treat cancer patients and lives have been lost. And again, he didn't seem to think that it was enough reason to change people there. So, I mean, it's just so awful because, you know, anybody's had a relative that dies of cancer, you know how traumatic it is, and time matters. You know, you've got to get so you know, if you don't have the right people in charge, they can't even spend an available budget. And again, Premier Lesofie defended them because he said, no, we're providing treatment and this and that. You know, it's just so weak. So what is protecting the current head of the Gauteng Health Department? He's failed on cancer treatment. The court has ruled against them twice. He is not lifestyle audit. We're still trying to find out that.
It's been delayed.
And this is the man that is going to fix up corruption in the Gauteng Health Department,
including
Tembisa Hospital, who himself is being investigated by the SIU. You know, so I'm just gobsmacked. So, you know, he's being protected because the Premier himself doesn't seem to be able to remove him.
I'll tell you a story. I've got a resident in my ward who has got stage 4 cancer. And the average person would look at him and say, look, it's the end, my friend. You know, he's being treated at the moment at a Western Cape Provincial Health Facility, and he's receiving world-class treatment that is keeping him alive, that is actually extending his life and possibly going to take him out of the risk of death situation as a stage 4 cancer patient. Unfortunately, in DA-led governments, we don't give up on people. We don't steal their money.
In Gauteng, they buy Lamborghinis. But then there are other issues here, Jack. I think the issue of the treatment of cancer patients is quite important. But it seems like it is happening at multiple health facilities in Gauteng, and it's not confined to just one health facility, even though there are funds. And as you say, the Premier seems like his hands are tied. If we were to begin to say, which hospitals are the most affected in this issue in Gauteng, if maybe there's information to that effect?
Well, I actually asked these questions of the companies, these fake companies that got contracts at Tembisa Hospital. I asked, have they got any other contracts? And it turned out that Mamelodi Hospital, they'd got some contracts. Shamaneke Hospital, they got contracts.
Okay.
Honsong Hospital, they'd got contracts.
Syndicate.
Yes, they were getting other contracts, and we've got so many fishy contracts. You know that Gauteng Health has got food contracts from, they're getting food for hospitals from Free State and from Limpopo. I mean, how fishy is that? Why on earth do you have to get bread from the Free State and ordinary groceries from Limpopo? So there's so many fishy contracts. You're in Gauteng. Can't you find a grocery store down the road? And we
Surely
have to
there's a macro somewhere there.
Well, not if it's a connected person. So we got fishy food contracts. And as a result, you've also had scandals where people don't get food in hospitals. You know, that's the other outcome. So it's not just people stealing, they don't deliver. So there's so many fishy contracts. There's so many badly managed hospitals. You know, the health ombudsman, Professor Makgoba, he did a investigation of Rahima Musa Hospital, and completely unsuitable CO had to be removed there. I mean, that's a mother and child hospital. And he said, we have Mickey Mouse hospitals run by Mickey Mouse. I mean, that's what he said. He called it.
The president of this country should be ashamed of himself, not just from his constitutional duty to be the president, but the fact that it's alleged that he's got family members that are involved in the killing of people in this way. The president has got to be ashamed of himself.
Well, he should be ashamed of a lot of things. Now we're looking at these various connections in the police, and if you can't trust the police, who can you trust? Because one of the things that comes out in Jeff Wick's book is that there were attempts to botch the case against the killers of Babita Deokaran.
Yeah.
It was only because of certain people who pushed ahead. I've just finished his book. They wanted to hand it over from a very competent detective who was tracing the murderers and give it to the Hawks. So then eventually was given to the Hawks, and key evidence was missing because I think there seemed to have been pressure applied not to find out who ordered the killings, because, these are killers for hire, right? So, if they're caught, their families are assisted. What Jeff Wick says in his book is that these were 6 men from a rural area in KwaZulu-Natal, really poor people. Suddenly they had the most high-powered lawyers defending them. Who was paying those high-powered lawyers? So 6 of them were convicted. We know there were actually some more that were involved, but we want to know who gave the order. And frankly, I think we're getting quite close to it now because of the SIU. Must have been one of these masterminds, these politically connected people. Just think, giving the order to murder someone who was doing her job. It is just, the family are devastated and, will never recover because they can't. But let her death be, the catalyst for something, that gets rid of corruption. That's what we actually want to do, because if you can crack open the Babita murder case, I think you will open up such a can of worms. I think it goes up to the highest levels of this country, and I think that's what they fear, because let Babita Deokaran's legacy be that reforms are made, people or the culprits are caught, they put away in bars, and we don't let this happen before, and that people who do their jobs are put in the right jobs and allowed to do their jobs and not murdered because they blow the whistle.
How do we protect whistleblowers?
Well, you protect their anonymity, of course, but it's going to come out, so there should be safe houses. And they mustn't be victimized. We have too many cases where people blow the whistle and then they get dismissed from their jobs. And we've had cases where they got trumped up charges. You know what happened to Bibita Deokaran? At one stage, she was suspended with the trumped up charges. That's what happens to people.
Yeah.
So we must treasure people who refuse to do what was wrong. What came out of the Life Esedimeni inquest was that they said if you're a medical professional and you are told to do something that's going to lead to people's lives being lost, you must say no. You can't do it just because you have your Hippocratic oath.
Yeah.
And if you know that mental health patients are going to die because they sent to some, sort of NGO that was formed the week before, I mean, that's really what was happening there, then you're obliged to speak out. And too many people in the Gauteng Health Department didn't speak out. There was one resignation, an early resignation, somebody who didn't want to go through with it, but the others were all quiet. So, I mean, people out there, you must speak out. When lives are at stake, don't carry it out and go to the press and responsible authorities and make sure it's stopped. But we can't have people dying because other people want to get rich.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
But also if, like for instance now, if you treat people like this, like the weakest of the weak like this, is there any hope for the ordinary person there on the street? Because it means now that essentially Panyaza Yusuf is running a criminal syndicate in Gauteng instead of running an actual government that cares about people.
Well, yes, and I think the voters need to understand that and also understand that Premier Lesufi runs a minority government. I mean, he's propped up in his executive by three of these, these tiny little parties that always seem to get co-opted. Yeah. But frankly, we have other opposition parties, the EFF and MK, who, if they voted with us, we could vote down the budget. Last year, we went to them and said, look, vote against the Gauteng Health Department budget because then we can force some reforms there, because they'll have to come back to us. It doesn't mean that there's no money to keep it going in the interim. If you voted with the DA against the Gauteng Health Department and other budget votes, the Premier would have to come running to us and we could force some reforms through before we vote for the budget. They didn't. So here you have a minority coalition government in the Gauteng legislature, and other opposition parties are not willing to stand up for it. I put through a motion of censure against the Gauteng Health MEC over the lack of treatment for cancer patients. The ANC is stalling it. They just don't want it to come to the floor. And we've gone to court. Can you believe it? We have to go to court so that my motion of censure to come to the floor. And I think this one would be supported by other opposition parties. But I think we're going beyond just censuring the present health MEC. I think she should be fired. Yes, I mean, when you see all the things that go wrong there, but we're going to court just to get a simple motion of censure debated.
Yeah, but I think we need to name and shame. In Gauteng, it's a minority government which is being propped up by the Patriotic Alliance. Yeah. That one of Katie and McKenzie is being propped up by Rise Mzansi. Yeah. It is also being propped up by the IFP as well, like in that province.
And they equally accountable for what's happening. They approving these budgets. They approving these plans. They are equally accountable.
That's true.
And this is why this discussion has been so interesting for me because I'm not in Gauteng. I read the newspaper. I know now so much more about the nuts and bolts. I mean, your life, you uncovering a lot of this. You are putting yourself out there. Your life must be at risk.
It has crossed my mind, but of course I'm a public figure. The problem for Bibita is that she whistleblowed internally. So they knew that if they got rid of her, nobody would know about it, you see. So the lesson for whistleblowers is go public. And that's what McKenzie has just done. He's gone public in the biggest way. He went on TV and all that. So
With his camouflage.
So he said, wow, but imagine if he just went off timidly and sort of phoned the corruption hotline. If he phoned the corruption hotline and said, the minister is in collusion with the criminal syndicate,
What's ever going to come out?
it wouldn't come out. So I think this point has been made that you're a bigger target if you're an internal whistleblower, because then you can be shut up.
Yeah.
But look, it's my job, and I feel it's my duty to expose, and as people do contact me with things. I ask questions. It's very powerful, and we can't give up on our democracy. And I think local government elections are coming up, but then again we go to provincial and national. I mean, the voters must observe. First of all, these little micro parties, don't seem to. They just seem to gravitate to the ANC, quite frankly. And then MK and EFF, they're also propping up Lesotho, actually,
because there's no accountability. They don't want to be accountable. So they go where it's easy. They go where there's the opportunity to steal. They go where there's the opportunity to fill their coffers. That's where they go. It's not about people for these parties. It's not about people for the PA. It's not about people for the IFP. It's not about people for the ANC. It's not about people for every one of these parties, because they are in it for themselves.
What else don't we know, the public, that is? Because I think you've just revealed something that I had no idea of. The fact that the Gauteng Health is receiving basic groceries from Limpopo and getting bread from Free State or Northwest. What other sort of Gauteng Health issues that we don't know? Because another thing that you've also just mentioned, I think the issue of the Tembisa Hospital has come under my scope now, but you're mentioning that all of these fake companies were getting other contracts at other hospitals. Are there any issues that maybe we might not be aware of?
Well, security contracts are always notoriously corrupt. So they were awarded, private security contracts were awarded in 2016 for a 2-year period. They did a commission of inquiry. This to guard hospitals. There was a commission of inquiry and found, no, they were awarded contracts, corruptly. It was actually found that. So 2016 for a 2-year contract. Do you know that they extended it on a month-and-month basis for like another 8 years? Corrupt contracts extended a month, and every year the Auditor General said, this is irregular spending, and they just ignored the Auditor General. Then finally, they put it out to tender, and of course,
who wins the tender?
Well, I found something else out. The tender amounts had ballooned for like 3-4 times. I was complaining when at Johannesburg Hospital, they were spending 30 million rand a year on security at that hospital. I said, if you can get a small army for that, what are you spending 30 million rand? Every money, we all want security, but money has to go to priority functions. That hospital's got vacancies, and I said, you're spending 30 million rand. You know what they're spending now? 73 million rand. I said, how does 30 million rand seem to be too much to me? Now they're spending 73 million rand.
On security.
On the security
at the hospital
a year, and it's a similar amount at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, and all the amounts have ballooned. So our health committee actually went to Tara Mental Hospital, which was very interesting. And anyway, we went there, and they seem to have a rather number of too many guards, to be honest. We went there, was like 5 people at the entrance. Then we asked this question. They said, no, we only wanted 24 guards, but they gave us 45 guards. And we're overpaying. We're paying like 5 million rand extra a year for these guards that we don't want.
Unbelievable.
And they had shortages of psychiatrists and nurses and doctors. And I mean, so I think they blew up the requirements for how just to expand the contract amount. And of course, these security guards don't get paid what they should be paid, so they rip off the security guards. I mean, there's all sorts of things there. So we're grossly overpaying for security. I mean, there's the food contracts. Wherever you look, you'll find corruption.
Jack, can I ask you something? And I mean, allegedly, are these security companies linked in any way to people in the ANC?
Well, that's what's been told to me, and I think it's probably true. I mean, it is so fishy. I mean, at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, I was told that the CEO has her own security detail, and and our own costs. I said, well, is the state paying for this? No, she's paying for it out of her own pocket. It just doesn't make sense. But I'll give you another one. The deputy mayor of Tshwane is linked in with a company called Triotic, which we've been raising there. There's a connection that they've established there. Anyway, so his Triotic security company is getting big contracts at Tshwane Council. But I asked the question at Gauteng. It turns out they're guarding Gauteng Health Department's head office. They've actually got big contracts. So, our people in Tshwane are looking at the connection between the current deputy mayor of Tshwane, the ANC deputy mayor, and this particular company, and how he's connected to it, and so this company is getting contracts from the city council there, it's getting contracts from Gauteng Health Department. So, but the ANC doesn't act on any of this. They don't act on any of this
for one reason only: they're benefiting from it.
True.
If they were not benefiting from this, they would have acted on it a long time ago. The ANC is benefiting from every single one of these corruption cases that are happening.
But maybe let's answer this question now, Jack. 2029, DA becomes majority government in Gauteng.
Now, you know what happens? Gauteng voters listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
They share this podcast all over Gauteng.
Yeah.
And 2029 comes. And Jack's not the premier candidate. But 2029 comes. And they all vote for the DA to be the government.
Jack is the MEC of health.
What happens first?
What's the first thing that you're going to fix?
Well, the irony of it being the chief critic of the Gauteng Health Department would be for like 35 years then. And then you say, well, here you are, Jack, fix it up. Which will be quite daunting.
You're the most experienced guy there.
Yeah, we've learned from taking over from rotten administrations of the Western Cape, and we've had ready-to-govern exercise in what you do. But I mean, as Helen Ziller will discover when she's mayor of Johannesburg, the amount of rot there is so extensive. So, I mean, first of all, you get rid of the rotten people. So you must do that as soon as you can. Just put decent, honest professionals in charge and let them do their job. And you're probably going to have to take some very tough decisions because you've got lots of, difficult things to make, but you've got to turn it around. But just put why do people go into medicine? Why do doctors go into medicine? I would like to think they want to save lives. Why do people go into the medical field? So I come across astonishingly good people even in our Gauteng hospitals, doing the very best under very adverse circumstances. Yeah. And people like that should be CEOs of hospitals, not these sort of Mickey Mouse people that they put in charge. So why don't you just put there, and these hospitals have huge amounts of money. Yeah. Chris Hani Baragran Hospital, 4 billion rand. So you don't just put anybody in charge there. You've got to have a seasoned, honest, competent person. The best person for the job, as Helen says, fit for purpose. So you put fit for purpose people. It's very important at your CEO level because they have huge budgets, head office, clear out the rot. I think you're going to have to do all sorts of audits to find out what's really going there because you don't know what you don't know. It's probably even worse than you actually imagine. But, I mean, to me, the lesson of Tembisa Hospital, there's good news and bad news. Look, the bad news is that 2 billion rand was extracted from a mid-sized hospital. It was lost. It was stolen by horrible people. The bad news, that's the bad news. That's the bad news. But the good news, there is good news, is wow, what if you actually spent the 2 billion rand on Tembisa Hospital? The money is there. Beds, the money is actually there. So the Gauteng health budget is enormous. It's the largest health budget in South Africa, 67 billion rand. Imagine if you spent every penny of the 67 billion rand on
healthcare for people.
On healthcare for people. So stop the stealing and start the healing. And then I think that we can get Gauteng Health Department right.
I think that's the slogan for 2029.
Stop the healing.
Stop the stealing
and start the healing.
Start the healing. But also,
you should send him to marketing.
As we say, stop the stealing and start the healing. What is it that you're going to continue doing now in your role as someone that has played a critical role in Gauteng, from exposing life esidimeni, from even running with this issue now of the Tembisa Hospital? What are your immediate plans? What are you going to keep doing now until 2029? What is in the radar?
Well, I'm going to make it very difficult for Premier Lesufi to keep the present health MEC and the present head of department. I've really got questions lining up for the next. He must dread questions Premier time because, well, what happened with the cancer issue is that he made an apology. He hasn't said anything, but he said, I make an apology. He had to be forced to make it. And then, of course, the apology was rejected by all the cancer sufferers. And because, yes, I mean, we don't need apologies. We actually need actions. So I'm going to make their life hell until they get chucked out. I'm going to ask those tough questions. Well, I've gone through quite a few health MECs, actually. Quite a few have resigned because of things that I've exposed. So I suppose they respect you even better. I hope they fear you. That's what you want as a politician. You must never want to be loved as a politician. It's the worst thing you can do. If you're not doing your job, if you're loved by the government of the day, you mustn't give them the soft questions. They must fear you and respect you, and that's because you're asking the tough questions.
I always say, if your opposition is not speaking about you and criticizing you, you're doing something wrong. Should Panyaza resign?
Well, in a normal democracy, people will resign in shame, but I mean, nothing happens here. Well, how many cabinet ministers do we have now? I mean, now we've got the social development, which is poor people dependent on grants and allegedly having some sort of love affair with the director general.
No, with the office assistant or something.
She's appointed an unqualified, with the unqualified assistant who was irregularly appointed. I mean, a scandal like that in a department that is so important for the poorest of the poor in this country, and you think President Cyril Ramaphosa is going to do anything about it?
Did you see the WhatsApp messages?
Nah, hey, look,
you just can't believe it.
I've been spared their messages.
I'll send it to you.
You'll send it to me. You'll send it to me. So, I mean, in any other democracy, people would resign in shame. And you say, all right, they'd give a, abject apology and they vanish from public life. I mean, here we just take it for granted, unfortunately. And, we have a spineless president who should just be firing them. And he doesn't, because, these are important players within the ANC. So he can't afford to take the real measures. And at the end of the day, there's all those people at the Zondo Commission who are still out there and haven't been prosecuted. And until we see action on that, and, we can't keep having more and more commissions and investigations. At the end of the day, we actually need to see something happening.
Is Panyaza Lesufi is evidently chief accountable officer of the mess in Gauteng, specifically with health. Let's skip the MEC. The MEC was appointed by Panyaza. Panyaza Lesufi must go. He has to go. It cannot be that he stays on any longer. But is Cyril Ramaphosa protecting Panyaza Lesufi for his own political opportunity?
Well, there's all these factions in the ANC, so one's never quite sure what's going on. As I said, in a normal democracy, the president would take accountability and step down. The president would step down, the premier would step down, the MEC would step down, the head of a department would go. But this is what we have: lack of accountability. Look, the voters of this country must wake up, absolutely wake up. Come to the next election, just throw them all out. We say vote for the DA. We've got the track record, and we certainly have no truck with corruption. We'll put the best people in charge. You've got an alternative like us. Vote for us. But the very least you could do is just chuck out this, this crime syndicate called the ANC.
But then, do you think is it completely justified for Premier Lesufi to almost, be paralyzed and into inaction in this issue and almost dropping everything on the MEC? But I don't know, Jack, but I think my view is he's the accounting authority. He's the appointing authority. Ultimately, the buck stops with him. If the mess of the Gauteng health, it is in its current state now, and MEC is a by the way thing. The buck stops with the Premier. The Premier should act. Why is Panyaza not acting? Isn't he seeing all of this thing, or is he benefiting from this corruption?
Well, the DA has been asking some tough questions about all these forensic audits and investigations, and it turns out there's, sort of well over 100 of them, and they've all been buried and not released. So we're forcing him to release them. We've made application under the Promotion of Access to Information Act, and he's starting to release them, but they're heavily redacted. We want to know what's been done.
He's edited them.
Yeah, he's edited them. Well, they've been edited. So basically, we've got to force these reports out, and then sunlight is the best disinfectant, as they say, and we need to find out where all the culprits are, and why is he protecting them? Because yes, that's the way the ruling party operates. Is that they all look after each other, and they all have skeletons, Smolanyana skeletons, as we've been told. So if you expose me, I'll expose you, and that's the name of the game. And the people who suffer are people in hospitals and the poorest of the poor.
And that goes back to your point you made earlier. Those parties that are propping up Panyaza Lesufi and the ANC in Gauteng are equally to blame and must take accountability for what's happening. Because running a minority government should, at the very least, ensure that the main accounting officer, the Premier, is held on his toes all the time. Because at any point, he could be voted out. He could, a motion of no confidence can be put against him.
Tomorrow he could be.
He could be voted out tomorrow. Today, the motion can be put through. And so those parties that you mentioned earlier, let's do them again. The IFP, the PA, Mkhonto weSizwe, Rise Uzanzwe, Mkhonto weSizwe, I know they're a part of government, but they're part and parcel of what's happening. Those parties are equally to blame for what is happening to the people of Gauteng. No two ways about it.
Every budget that comes up, we vote down the budgets. We call for separate budgets. We called for a roll call. We were giving them every opportunity. They can vote against, particularly the Gauteng Health Department budget, which should, we need to force reforms there. And we don't get support from the EFF and MK, Correct. Which are not part of the so-called government of provincial unity that they call. It's just a minority coalition. That's what it is. And so voters should hold them to account. They should say, well, if you voted with the DA, you could hold the Premier to ransom. You could put in a motion of no confidence. So I suspect they've tied up their own deals.
Correct.
They've tied up their own deals. You see, they're actually part of the problem.
Correct.
So here we are. We've got the DA. We fight to put things right. We really do, and we will get rid of corruption. We will put the best people in the job and get the province moving. That's what's the frustration. So, but the opportunity now is you can have Helen Zille as mayor of Johannesburg.
What's your message to voters in Gauteng?
Well, you've got an opportunity coming up next year. So that would be a game changer. Having Helen as mayor of Johannesburg, having DA mayors for all the other big cities, all the other local authorities in Gauteng, I think can show what the DA difference can make. And I think it'll be, people will see what can happen when you don't steal the money and when you spend it on what it should be spent on. And of course, that would be the precursor to the next provincial and national elections. We want to see change at those levels as well. So give the DA a chance. You're nothing to lose.
I want to take the opportunity to thank you for what you have dedicated your entire life to. I really, on behalf of myself, the team, the viewers out there, the listeners on the podcast, thank you so much, Dr. Jack Bloom, for what you are doing. Thank you so much for never giving up, going there to see for yourself.
Absolutely.
Going there to see for yourself, being one of the biggest whistleblowers, and doing it without fear, doing it without favor. Because let me say this to you clearly, if it were not for you, there would have been hundreds, if not thousands of people that would have died in the Life Esidimeni tragedy. Too many died already. The corruption scandal of Tembisa Hospital that is coming to the fore now, would have been hidden away and swept under the rug like everything else. And every other thing that is negatively affecting the residents' primary healthcare in Gauteng, you have fought for. Dr. Jack Bloom, thank you very, very much, sir.
No, thank you. I hope I live up to people's expectations.
Thank you very much.